And you can begin.
Hello, I'm Jack McCarthy, and today I'm going to be talking about psychology in education. John Locke, in his essay on human understanding, said that human experience is what primarily shapes the human mind. And this has been gone on to be proven by psychologists in the modern era, such as B.F. Skinner. Now, if the human mind truly is shaped by experience, then it would stand to reason that when humans are young and at their most impressionable, we should be using our understanding of the psychology of the human mind to best shape their experience and therefore their education. Now, first off, and one of the most important aspects of psychology which we can apply to education, is the concept of operant conditioning. Now, operant conditioning was first developed by Ivan Pavlov, the fellow with the lovely beard on the left side of the screen. And what he said is that you can actually engineer a certain response in an animal by providing a stimuli and the desired response. Now, I'm sure many people in the room have heard of Pavlov's famous dogs and how he was able to make them salivate at the sound of the bell. This was all because he paired the food with the bell. And eventually, the dogs, which already salivated at the food, began to generalize that experience and salivate at the bell as well. Now, while this is very simple, it can also be applied to humans, not just animals. And the most common, and in some ways the most infamous example of this is in gambling. Now, many of the older members of the audience may or may not know, but when you're in a casino while you're gambling, over the loudspeaker, the owners of the casino are playing the sounds of a slot machine playing out, or people hurraying and hurrahing as if they've just won. In reality, all that many people aren't winning. However, you are constantly, when you're in the casino, being assaulted with those positive sounds. Ka-ching, over and over and over again in the background. The positive response is created, and you're compelled to continue to gamble. And in a similar way, we can combine a positive stimuli with the classroom to force a positive response from the students when they enter a classroom. This can be anything from a positive relationship with a teacher to the teacher giving out candy as a reward. Very simple things can have a very powerful effect on the human mind, because as John Locke said, our mind is shaped by experience. Deeper into the world of psychology, we have the diffusion of responsibility. And whereas operant conditioning can be used to shape the experience within the classroom, diffusion of responsibility can be used to shape the students to be better people for when they leave the classroom. Now, diffusion of responsibility is a psychology term for what many may know as the bystander effect. Now, students who have gone to assemblies on bullying or parents who have received newsletters home may have heard about the bystander effect. And the bystander effect deals with the concept that when we are faced with somebody who is being bullied or in pain in any way, we are likely to turn a blind eye to that. Diffusion of responsibility goes deeper into that, and it says that the larger the group you're in, the less likely you are to help somebody in need. Literally, the responsibility of helping that person is diffused throughout the group. Now, I could use an example from bullying in the classroom. However, a much more powerful example and a more tangible example in the real world is the murder of Kitty Genovese. Now, she was killed in the middle of New York City, stabbed multiple times in the middle of the street in front of 37 neighbors. They were all watching from their apartments and they did nothing. Why did they do nothing? Not because they were bad people, but because they were affected by diffusion of responsibility. None of them did anything because there were so many people there. The responsibility of helping her was literally diffused throughout the group. Now, how could this apply to education? It isn't just talking about bullying in the classroom. It goes beyond that. According to the Beeman study conducted by psychologist Arthur Beeman, when somebody learns about the diffusion of responsibility, they are twice as likely to help somebody in need and resist diffusion of responsibility. By teaching students about certain aspects of psychology, such as diffusion of responsibility, we are turning them into more proactive people and citizens in the future. Now, while diffusion of responsibility deals with what can we turn students into for the future, and operant conditioning deals with how we can have students have a positive reaction to being in the classroom, the dangers of behaviorism deals with the darker side of human psychology, so to speak. Here is more of what happens when you pair negative stimuli to being in the classroom. Now, as I said before when talking about John Locke, humans are very impressionable when they're young. And this is seen clearly in the Little Albert experiment. Now, Little Albert was a little kid, as would be assumed by the name, and what psychologists did was they presented him with little white mice and little white little white rabbits, harmless, adorable animals. And what they did is, after presenting him with these animals, they began to bang pots and pans behind his head. And over time, he became afraid of the harmless little white mice and the little white rabbits. But it didn't stop there. What happened to little Albert next is a little bit frightening. His fear of the white mice and the white rabbits did what psychologists call generalize. It began to stretch to creatures and things that were white and fluffy that weren't necessarily mice and rabbits. Little Albert, as he grew older, would see a woman walking down a hallway with a white fur coat on, and he'd have an immediate fear response. In the classroom, teachers need to be aware of the experience they're putting students through. Because if they are not, potentially, you could destroy any idea of lifelong learning in a student, as they would have such an intense negative reaction to being in the classroom, or being around a teacher, or even being in a learning environment. Now, while these reasons may all be good and well to include psychology in the education system, one thing stands in the way. In the minds of many Americans, there is a nagging doubt that psychology is not a hard science. And if it truly is not a hard science, then it shouldn't be included in such influential moments of a young citizen's history. Now, while there may in fact be many psychologists and schools of psychology which are dealing in dream analysis, the type of psychology which needs to be implemented in schools is not that kind of psychology. It's a kind of psychology that has been studied over the centuries and has been studied through the lens of the scientific method, so that it is much more infallible than other more soft science sides of psychology. Tested by people like B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov, famed psychologists and competent psychologists as well, who have tested these theories over and over again, making them almost as scientific as a natural science, and making it so that we should be able to comfortably integrate psychology, or at least these certain types of psychology, into our education system. So what lies in the future of psychology and education? We can have students have a positive reaction to the classroom, so they will be more engaged in classroom discussions and have a more positive relationship with teachers so that they can learn more. We can keep away negative stimuli from the classroom to create a mentality of lifelong learning in the student. And finally, we can teach students aspects of psychology which will help them become better citizens and better people later in life.
Thanks, Jack. Your first question: how did you select the strategies you used to gather information or conduct your research, and were your strategies effective?
So what I did when I was first began my research is I tried to find I looked up a psychological theory, usually ones that I learned in psychology class actually, and from that I branched out and began to go into the smaller details of each theory so that I could have a better understanding. So a lot of my research became trying to understand the material, rather than simply just pulling out a specific nugget or specific fact. It was more of gaining a broader understanding.
Thank you. Your second question. What might be the real-world implications or consequences, and by that I mean influence on others' behaviors or decision-making processes of your findings? What are the implications to your community?
So, if psychology really is fully integrated into education, what I hope is that it will have an extremely positive reception, as we will find that you get more students who are more willing to go to school. And although I don't imagine a future in which all students are perfectly happy to be shipped off on the big yellow limo, the hope is that eventually what can happen is students will have a more positive reaction to going to school, and students will want to go to school more.
Very good. Thank you very much. And as Addison queues up, if anyone has any questions for Jack.